Today's Smokin' in the Girls' Room, so we're going to be covering the Ebola virus, which for the first time in the history of the United States is here as of this morning, I believe at about 11:30 a.m. The first Ebola patient, who is an American citizen, he is a doctor, came in via plane, and the second person, I believe, will be arriving.
Right, they can only one patient at a time.
Only one patient at a time. So we're going to be talking about the Ebola virus.
What about Cindy? We should make Cindy go first because she did all the research and she's been absent.
All right, Ebola. Ebola. I did a little historical research, and it first appeared in 1976, and it takes its name from the Ebola River, which is near a village where that first outbreak started in 1976. The virus is transmitted to people from wild animals, and it spreads human to human through contact with an infected person's bodily fluids. Vomit, blood, sweat, any fluids. Fruit bats, which are implicated in this current breakout of Ebola, are considered to be a natural host of the disease.
Without being affected by it, which was interesting.
Yeah. It's introduced into the human population through close contact with the blood, organs, or bodily fluids of an infected animal.
And in Africa, isn't that why it spreads so widely there? Because they eat bush meat. They do eat bush meat. Bats and other animals from the bush that could be contaminated.
And they also the human population is in close proximity to the animals. Even if they don't eat the bush meat, if they have occasion to get blood or some type of saliva on them from an infected animal and it gets into their bloodstream, then the infection starts. They've also had the infection in other animals such as chimpanzees, gorillas, monkeys, forest antelope, pigs. It comes through human to animal contact and then human to human contact from bodily fluids. So there's a little history.
And no cure.
Ebola. No cure.
No cure. Right. No vaccination to prevent against it and no cure.
Well, of course not. There's never any vaccination to protect against any disease that springs from the dark continent. Let's just be clear about that right now.
I love you, Gabrielle.
But really, I'm serious. My question is, since 1976, people have been eating bush meat, living amongst the animals, doing all that stuff since time immemorial. What has happened in Africa from then till now that has suddenly made stuff on the continent so freaking deadly? I understand the disease element of it. I understand the contagion factor. But there has to have been something that has changed dramatically in order to make it so that people are not allowed to eat the meat that they've been eating for generations.
They don't really know that that's the genesis of it or not. They're not sure.
So then to focus it on that, I mean, I think it's kind of unfair. You know, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the main thing that they're saying, but I read one thing that they were saying not to eat the bushmeat, but I don't know if that's what they're saying the genesis of this is.
Right. Well, when you asked about a change, one of the articles I read actually indicated that because we're cutting down rainforests and a lot of viruses and pathogens live in the rainforest and we're destroying the habitat, we're releasing things into the environment
that did not exist before.
And that might be the change you're talking about.
That's exactly where I'm going. It's just like, this is a horrible thing, but I think that the West is culpable in creating those changes. So I just wanted to get that right off the top of my head there.
The good news, Gabrielle, is that when you mention a vaccine, they are working on a vaccine right now. And the vaccine, they've been working on it for a couple of years. The National Institute of Health in the United States has been working on it, and they may start testing in September.
Right. There's also a serum, but the one thing that I read about the spread of it in Africa is because a lot of people that live in the bush, they don't believe in traditional medicine.
That's right.
So what they'll do is their family members will get sick, and they will treat them at home. And then the other family members and whole families end up getting wiped out, and then they dispose of the bodies by burying them instead of burning them. So that's one of the reasons that it's more likely to spread in a third world country than maybe here in the United States. Because I know that when I initially read that they were bringing an Ebola patient here, I'm like, oh my God, that's awful. We're going to have, contagion. spread.
Personally, I think that the missionaries should stay in the area where they got sick.
Yes, I agree.
I'm really not into missionaries at all, but if you feel like you have to go over and save the dark continent and you get sick there, you should die there.
I agree. I don't think they should come back here either.
I don't either, especially when you read about what they're going to do for them. Basically, since there is no cure, they're going to give them oxygen, which that's easy to administer over there. They were going to give them IV, easy to administer, and maybe blood or blood platelets.
Well, there was one serum dose that they gave the woman, Nancy, whatever her name was.
But they're so ill. Why would you travel somebody that ill anyway?
Well, Dr. Brantley actually got out of the van on his own steam, and he was given a blood transfusion from a 14-year-old kid that he treated, and the kid survived. And apparently that's kind of a last resort thing where they'll give somebody blood from someone else that has survived, hoping that maybe the antibodies will help them.
But why here?
They can give
I agree.
blood transfusions in Africa. They do that.
I'm wondering, why are they bringing them here?
And
All right, I'm going to take the other position. I argued this position with my family members who disagreed with me, and they agreed with you. They felt that these two contaminated people should not be transported to the United States and treated here. And I take the position, yes, if we have the ability to treat them and perhaps offer them more medical care than what they could receive where they are, save these individuals and maybe develop different ways to treat this disease. It's a horrific disease, and they're studying this disease, and they're trying to find treatments for it. And if bringing these people over and having them in the right situation so that they don't cause any harm to anybody else, why not?
Well, why not do it over there, though, when there's only Emory Hospital in Atlanta is only one of 4 hospitals that's able to even handle something like this.
Right.
Why introduce such a deadly disease? Who cares about the United States to any other country? Why do that when you can actually help them over in their own country?
Do you think we would have heard about this if there weren't people coming to the United States to be treated?
Americans coming to the United States.
That's what I don't know if we would have even heard about this story.
It piqued the interest. I've actually asked Carm a couple of times to talk about this because I've been sort of obsessed with Ebola ever since I read The Hot Zone back in 1994, which is a really, really great book about this. It's been fascinating to me, so I've been interested in the topic. But it seems like ever since they said these 2 people were coming here, God forbid, to our country, all of a sudden everybody's interested.
Right.
Maybe that's, in some ways, that's a bad thing, but in some ways, perhaps it's a good thing to
bring about a
research.
cure.
And I was reading that this current outbreak, there's a 60% rate of death with people with Ebola, as opposed to in the past a 90% rate. So I don't know if
I think it depends on the strain.
Exactly.
What I read.
And what Gabrielle had said earlier, like what's changed, like what
could be the rainforest being cut down,
right?
And all.
I see when I look at Africa and I see what it's been going through in the last 100 years alone. I won't even go into colonialism or slavery or any of that stuff. But what the West has been doing in that continent is sick. And I think they are directly culpable. I think that you cannot expect to go into a country, suck all the oil out, have little children digging for coltan, filthy up the water, and expect nothing to happen. These people have to eat. They have to, they're going to rely on their traditional sources of food and nourishment and sugar. And to not take that into consideration, and these people go over with these big, broad ideas, we're missionaries. We're going to bring you to God. We're going to educate you. We're going to, and all they do is just pull up their pants and take a big fat dump on the continent. And this is the result. Bottom line.
Gabrielle, I don't think anybody is blaming the people that are getting sick. And I think that the 2 people that they're bringing back to the country to treat were over there to help treat sick people. You have to look beyond what may be wrong about missionaries going over to different parts of Africa, Western Africa in particular, and you have to look at what is this about. This is about Ebola. It's about a horrific virus that is killing a lot of people, and what is going to ultimately help people. And helping people may mean coming up with vaccines, coming up with serum, research, bringing these 2 people back, trying different techniques to see if they work, and exporting those techniques to save lives in Africa.
What they'll do is they'll export the non-approved FDC medications to the dark continent, and they'll experiment on those people with it.
They're not going to. I mean, all the AIDS people, all the people who have AIDS in Africa, we have drugs that are not curing, but they're allowing people to live healthy, productive, normal lives. Africans are not getting those.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't understand that. They may develop some brilliant vaccine. The Africans will never see it.
But that's the only place where Ebola has come from, is Africa. We haven't seen it in other parts of the world.
So they'll create a vaccine that's only used on American or European missionaries.